May the 2nd, 2025. Guys, you're looking at this week's edition of Sat News. Now, this goes back 3 days to April the 30th. And it says a Russian satellite tunneling out of control. Again, satellite news. And what has happened during the Biden administration, and it was on the news in 2022, they launched what was called Cosmos 2553. Said it's tumbling out of control, posing a danger for other orbiting craft. Satellite observation specialist Leo Labs has reported that the anti-satellite weapon, which is nuclear, launched into orbit in 2022, is no longer functional. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because it's not tumbling down right now, but it's tumbling out of control. And they can determine that by using radar images. And I've seen them use the same images to show an asteroid tumbling. Many of you have also. Anyway, it was put up 2022 in response to Starlink and a couple of other groups. In other words, there's thousands and thousands of Starlink satellites out there now, guys, and they're launching more every day. And so Russia sees that as a military threat. And so they launched this Cosmos 2553. And it's what it is set up to do. We'll read this article, but is to, when it does its nuclear thing, it's supposed to do it in such a wide area you can knock out fleets or entire groups of satellites. And again, you've got a lot of Starlinks up there. So they're not saying how the nuclear weapon on it is set up, probably an electromagnetic pulse, an EMP. But it's tumbling out of control through some satellite bands, and we need to watch it. The reason I say that, excuse me, is that we don't want to go to war with Russia or China. We're already having to deal with the Middle East. That's enough. But when you deal with Russia and their technology, and China and their technology, you're talking about major world war, something we don't want to deal with, guys. The planet does not need that. So if it explodes, blows up a bunch of satellites, how will, especially U.S., how will our administration respond to that? So there's one of the problems there. The other is that it eventually deorbits and would probably burn up in the atmosphere with its payload on board. Let's read this. It says Cosmos 2553 is thought to be part of a Russian effort to develop a nuclear weapon that could indiscriminately fry many other satellites at once in low Earth orbit. That approach would threaten proliferated constellations that wouldn't otherwise be affected by losing a few spacecraft to traditional anti-satellite weapons. Again, this thing, it sounds like a very large blast radius. Now, Reuters, who I don't trust, but they're saying that it has been alleged by U.S. observers to be part of the Russian nuclear space weapon system. Cosmos 2553, launched by Russia weeks before invading Ukraine in 2022, has had various bouts of what appears to be errant spinning over the past year, according to Doppler radar data from space tracking firms like Leo Labs and optical data from Slingshot Aerospace shared in the news. Believed to be a radar satellite for Russian intelligence as well as a radiation testing platform. The satellite last year became the center of U.S. allegations that Russia for years has been developing a nuclear weapon capable of destroying entire satellite networks such as SpaceX's vast Starlink internet system that Ukrainian troops have been using. I don't know if they still are. I know it was shut down at one time. The Cosmos 2553 satellite has been in a relatively isolated orbit some 2,000 kilometers above the Earth, parked in a hot spot of cosmic radiation that communications or Earth-observing satellites typically avoid. Was it setting in its orbital position on purpose? And if so, then possibly it could be moved anywhere. Cosmos 2553 is one of dozens of Russian satellites in space with suspected ties to its military and intelligence programs. Guys, they have also hundreds and hundreds. And they're all not all little Starlink satellites. But they have them. Now, Cosmos 2025-3 is one of dozens of Russian satellites with suspected ties to its military and intelligence programs. The country has viewed SpaceX Starlink, a formidable constellation of thousands of satellites, as a legitimate military target, as Ukrainian troops use the service in conjunction with weapons on the battlefield. Again, before they invaded Ukraine, they did this. So we don't know what will happen with it. But I think it's important to realize that I'm sure both or all three of the militaries that I'm talking about have a very close eye on this thing. Of course, Russia has the direct data coming into its computer systems. But if it starts to move, if it starts to get into some of these areas that are very polluted with Starlink satellites, then that may be a different ballgame. But since Biden is not here, it may be a different relationship between Putin and Trump now. That is the best thing to happen between him, Putin, and Xi. Because work out the tariffs, whatever you got to do. Don't start a war. It will end with nuclear disaster for the planet. And guys, this is the tracker. Again, Cosmos 2553 right there. Longitude, latitude, speed 6.9 kilometers per second. Altitude 1999. Its average is 2,000 kilometers. And you can see right there it's dropping, but they drop and rise in their orbit because it's elongated. But let's pull this up a little bit. This is Africa. It's out over the Atlantic right now. You can see it moving south towards Praja. Here's Dakar. And it orbits, let's see, it takes probably 28 minutes for this satellite to orbit right there. Some of them do it much quicker than that. Some of them do it a little slower than that, like twice every hour and a half when they will come over. I'll link to this site, guys, and then you can search for whatever satellite that you're interested in. Now, the interesting thing about it is we also have another Russian satellite that is tumbling out of control, but it's now descending. It's breaking its orbit. They don't know exactly where it's going to hit. Let's take a look at that one too. Now, this is one of their early Cosmos satellites, and it was a Venus project. It says pictures of Russia's first Venus-bound rocket launched on February 12th. 1969. The left-hand diagram shows a general view of the rocket in its sections. Now, what happens when they deorbit, anything sticking out, the antennas, solar panels, that will be all burned and ripped off during re-entry. But it's a 1,000-pound satellite designed to go to Venus. So I'm not sure that this thing will completely tear apart or burn up in re-entry. We don't know that, but the longer ago that they were built, the better they were built as far as structurally. These new satellites, they're lighter, smaller. Some of them are mini satellites, but this one has a pretty solid center core to it. They're saying, look up in the sky, and it's a Soviet-era spacecraft meant to land on Venus in the 70s, now hurtling in an uncontrolled descent back to Earth, possibly landing anywhere on the planet in the first 2 weeks of May. There's a guy that's Dutch scientist Marco Langbroek, guys, that says he predicts it on May the 10th, 5 days away. He estimates it will come crashing in at 150 miles per hour if indeed it remains intact. Says it's too early to know where the half-ton mass of flying metal might come down or how much of it will survive re-entry, according to space debris tracking experts. Now, I don't think it's carrying anything nuclear. I don't know what kind of payload it was using for propulsion fuel. But the main thing would just be like a meteor impact, a small one. I wouldn't want to be looking up and seeing this thing come down on my head, but with the Earth covered in water, it just gives it a better chance of landing in the ocean. Again, we got 5 days out, and it can also be tracked. Now, this is the site. It's called n2yo.com, and it's sat tracking. If you look on bpearthwatch.com, scroll down on the right, you'll see larger thumbnails for some of the links, and this one is called Satellite Tracker, and it'll bring you here. Then what you'd have to do is, if you're reading an article somewhere, you know the name or the numeric designation of a satellite, you can enter it right there, and it'll pull it up, and it will give you the tracking information and the map. Now, if I'm doing a video, I don't put my location directly into the map as you watch the tracking, but that's up to you. But what will happen, it'll give you different information, like the International Space Station will cross over your sky in 10 hours, 57 minutes, 44 seconds, depending on where you're at, right? Well, let's take a look at that actual model. And guys, this is what we have. This is called Cosmos 482. Again, they're now up in the Cosmos thousands, the number of the satellite. It is, let's see where we got it. I'll move this over here. It is just coming off the Australian continent, and notice it says descent craft. Let me pull this up a little. We're out in the Pacific. This thing is right where the quake was earlier today. You see this? You've got, or very near it, in the Drake Passage. But right now, it's over the Coral Sea. You can see it. It is, elevation is minus 62.2. The altitude, 169, and we're talking about miles on this one, okay? See MI right there? It's 168.41 miles. It is in a descent now. It will still, and you watched me track these over the years, this thing, even though it's in a descent orbit, it will still have up and downs in the altitude, guys, if you're watching it here, right there in the kilometers, miles here. But 166.78, 166.63, you see that it's declining. But we don't know exactly where this thing's going to come down, but it's a very good way to track it, very interesting, and you can do a lot with it. We have another link on our website, guys, that I just remembered a couple of days ago to ask Tina to put on there. We had it on the old website years ago, and I don't know how it got put out. But let me show you that thing. Guys, come over to bpearthwatch.com, our website. Scroll down. By the way, this is the work of my lovely wife, Tina. She keeps everything updated, the articles and everything. Scroll down to your right. You've got eSword, your free Bible search software, satellite tracker that you just saw. And let's see, I think I may be mistaken that she put this on this side, guys. Bear with me here a moment. Let me find Stellarium. Many of you seen it. Sorry about the confusion there. It just went up. Guys, and it's going to bring you here again, Stellarium Web, but you can go to Stellarium, I think it's maybe .org. Anyway, it's the links on the website. You saw it right there in the left side. And you can come here. You see this little box, brown box. You can click there and then I've got this set north of us up in Rankin County. Here's Jackson, here's the reservoir and all. We're south. But you can move this anywhere to get the view of what we're going to see from exactly your location, if you like. We're going to look at a couple of constellations, some other things. This is a very, very good tool, guys, to use. But anyway, set it where you want it. I think it comes on, when mine came on, it had a smokehouse over here. I'm just telling you. I think it was in Georgia. And it was giving me that view. Now, you're going to get kind of the same ground view, but what it's going to do is give you the orientation of what you're looking at. Now, here's the moon. You probably can't see it. It's daylight. The sun's up here. There's Mercury. Pretty sure this is Jupiter right there. And there's several things you can do. We're going to go through it. Here is Mercury, Venus, and Saturn right there. But now imagine that something happened on Earth like it did to Mars. The atmosphere was stripped off. And guys, if we didn't have this blue sky that you're looking at right there, that this is it's because we have oxygen in the atmosphere and other chemicals too, but it creates this blue glow. But if something happened to our atmosphere, it would instantly, which is down here on the bottom, you can take it out and you would get the night view, but it's still daylight. In other words, you're taking away the atmosphere or adding it. Here's our sun, Mercury, Venus, and so you can get a night view in the daytime. But going back to that, that's if you didn't have any atmosphere, you wouldn't be alive, but that's what it would look like from Earth all the time. Also, this one is landscape. And guys, basically that would give you what the rest of the sky looks like, I guess, from anywhere. You see what I'm saying? Below your landscape. And you can see Vega right there on it. Here's west, south, and north. Put that landscape back on for a minute. And we're talking about the satellites and things like that. And that Russian satellite that's out of control, they say, not the one tumbling to Earth, but it's up there. But it spins. They don't really have any control of it. They say, is up there too. But if you want to, it's very interesting. If you can see, again, there's a sun. It's daytime here in central Mississippi. And if you start pulling in on this, you start to pull up different things. Very interesting. For instance, let's put the constellations in right there. Now, something we've been talking about and something that the Hopis say is the constellation where their generation came from is the Seven Sisters, the Pleiades. And the way you find that on here, you find, let's see, I'll show you this. Let me pull this up a little bit. Here is Orion. And if you're looking at the night sky, these three stars, there's none other like them. There's a lot of different constellations everywhere, but there's no other three stars lined up like that. They say they're lined up with the pyramids. Could be, but I do know that in one of the videos that I'm stacking in Canva in the PDF form, has a lot to do with Orion. And every 7,000 years, guys, it lines up with two columns at Göbekli Tepe over in Turkey. And every 7,000 years, and a comet has come through with a lot of deep debris trail almost every 7,000 years. And we're not far from the next cycle of that. And it's not exactly 7,000 years, but it's very close to it. 14,000 years ago, Younger Dryas, something happened 7,000 years ago, and it's every time it lines up with those two columns. But anyway, what is interesting to me is the Pleiades, and the way you find it, you look at the belt of Orion, go north, and you're going to get it run into Taurus, the bull right here. Let me get that up. Let's get closer. And out of this left horn, I guess, is the Pleiades. There's Uranus. There's a comet Swan in this area, but here, this is where the Hopis say their people came from. And if you ever looked at a Subaru logo on the cars, I think Subaru means Pleiades or Seven Sisters, but this is the logo. Anyway, you've got Atlas, Alcyon, and there's a blue clouds around this. Very interesting. The dust clouds, and that's how it looks on the Hubble and everything else. They can pull it up, but you can see there the constellations. Now, one thing about it, even though we had to zoom up, we'll look at it again, it's the closest constellation to our sun. See that? Now notice these little dots moving very quickly right here. We're going to look at that too. Let's just come up here. You see it suddenly sprouted wings as we zoom in. Starlink 4769. Now we're looking up, but if you look, let me back this thing out a little bit. Just as it pull into the local sky a little closer, and you're going to see what Elon has. Look at this, in motion, Starlink 1588. They're adding the new ones every day. I think all the green wings that I've seen are Elon's. And they're everywhere, guys. Especially when you start zooming down closer to the horizon. Look at this, showing the movement. Now they move, but if you zoom in on something like, say, we go back to the Pleiades. And guys, believe it or not, there's so much information going back in history from all civilizations almost that talk about the Pleiades. And I think it's important. I think it has something to do because it's lined up. It's the closest constellation to our sun. And they're talking about the energy and the frequencies increasing, just like when we're talking about the healing wings and Malachi from the sun. I think the alignment of a lot of this stuff is going to really cause the generation of those healing wings. Now, I'm not talking about a physical alignment, but possibly a magnetic alignment. Like we have, our Earth is magnetic. We have North and South Pole, right? Magnetic lines, field lines that are our shields. But if you get closer, you'll see a parent movement. That's because the Earth is moving, not the stars. And one thing, this star right here, we pull it up in the Seven Sisters, Alcyon, it's extremely bright, but in one reason, you're like using a telescope or something, is these three stars right behind it. There's more stars in there than the seven. They're the predominant ones. But if you look, if you watch that constellation, and guys, you can just zoom in on this. Look at that. But from far back, these three behind it make it appear as one. See that? Anyway, it's a great tool, and if you could probably find all the satellites if you wanted to go to that trouble. But the other link on our website, the NY20, you can type in what you're looking for. There's other features on here, like you can put your azimuth grid here. You can put your equatorial grid, take one or both off. And there's a couple other, you can add the meridian line and things like that. And right here is your deep sky object. What that does when it's on, you'll see these circles come in. You have out here gamma ray bursts, different things that they'll show there. And then you have night visions called night mode. Check that out. And that works in the daytime, even with atmosphere. But if you put your location in and you're watching for a meteor shower, called the Geminids or something like that, they name because they appear to come from those locations. But guys, I wanted to show you this. It's a really nice thing, and some of the stuff, that's Booger. Hey, hold, you okay, Booger? He wants me to let him out of the office, guys. Hold on 1 minute. I paused and let him out, guys. I'm not going to go back and cut that out and have to go through any editing, but it's already long enough, and I know you guys have probably seen enough. Now, you can also put the constellation art on, which is very interesting also. If you hit that button, you'll see all of this start to come up. All through. Now, I pulled it up so you can see everything. Pegasus, Sculptor, Phoenix, check it out, Columbia. And it brings you the art associated with the lines. Let me back it off again. Here, you see why they call it a horse? Look at that. Procyon, they've got a wolf or a dog there. I think it's a dog, Gemini, the twins. And you can take that off, and then you can kind of find your stuff and start learning what these stars are. Pretty cool, huh? But guys, we're watching this. You watch it. There's a lot going on. I've got 3 or 4 videos. Like I said, I'm stacking up in PDFs that are a little bit in detail. And as I get each one completed, because what I'm finding out is I'm getting different information each day that goes into a different file. Then when those files are ready, I'll get the videos out. A lot of it's a little deep, but very interesting. I think in these times, we need to be as deep as we can get. It's a heads up, guys. Be safe.